Welcome to Bluebirds on the Wire. This is my second episode, and whoever did actually watch my first, thank you very much. And I do want to say welcome. Welcome to my second episode of Bluebirds on the Wire. I guess I wanted to really focus on looking at the camera, first of all. And second of all, I wanted to kind of get into the backstory of all of the emotions and the illnesses and the medication and all of that stuff that I'm going to dive into in my next episodes. And really, I think that I need to explain really quickly how I'm going to work this. And I'm going up and down, yay or nay, basically. But this is, I think, how it's going to work for a bit. I will give my backstory in one episode to what I'm going to dive into the next episode and see all of my insecurities. What went wrong, what didn't go wrong, and every single emotion attached to the behaviors of that backstory. And really understand and actually help anyone who is actually watching this podcast, Bluebirds on the Wire, to understand the whys and why nots and the do's and don'ts and all of that involved in my story, because I think it's really important to connect those to the actual story, really, because everybody has a backstory. I do know that, to all of what comes out of us. And that is where I'm going to go with that. So hopefully that kind of like helps, anyone who wants to know what's happening next. So I'm going to start at 9 years old, right around there, 8 or 9. And this was, and really, I'll throw in a couple of other things prior to that. And why don't we just do that right now, actually? So at 8 years old, my aunt and uncle were coming to New Hampshire, not known by me, to pick me up and coming to New Mexico. I'm sorry, I totally said New Hampshire. Coming to New Mexico and pick me up and bring me to New Hampshire. So in that moment of my life, I was living in New Mexico, and I was living with my mother and father on and off, depending on the day. More with my father, because at that moment, and before any of that moment, all before, I was not a huge fan of my mother at all. Actually, could have cared less about the woman at the time. Things have obviously changed since then. I'm a grown adult, right? So let's do this. So at 8 or 9, and I haven't gotten that quite clear yet in which age it really was, but I was taken from New Mexico to New Hampshire by my aunt and uncle. And prior to being in New Hampshire, prior to that day, I was basically, and for me to put this, well, not nicely, but straight to the point, is that none of my needs were being met, as in having a consistent roof to live under, a safe environment to be around in any way. Stability, none. At points, I mean, I grew up with no electricity, no water, and really, I mean, food was very scarce in that area in my world. When we had it at my father's house, we had potatoes. That's that. We had fried potatoes. Any way you could make potatoes, that's what we got. And when we didn't have potatoes, we didn't have food. My mother's I ate. Actually, she's a really good cook to this day. She's always cooked, and she cooked vegan or vegetarian, and she's an amazing cook. But it was only when we had food that we actually ate. So when we did, we had lots of food. When we didn't, we had not much food. We pretty much, with my mother, always had beans, black beans, pinto beans, and tortillas and cheese for the most part. My mother didn't feed us milk or any of this. So we were living, I was actually being raised and fed. I was vegan. I was taking vitamins to supplement my body with the things that actually I needed to be growing. When I was brought or taken to New Hampshire by my aunt and uncle, in that moment, I had already been kicked out of multiple schools, elementary schools. I really didn't actually go to much of school in general. The moments that I do remember, I actually can remember. So that says it to me in every moment that that is a reality and that I didn't really go to school. I so coming from nothing, and I'm going to say nothing other than, I would say, the one thing that I feel like there was something of is, I mean, I understand now that the one thing that was there was my family, right? When they were there, I had to survive with my family. I didn't have any friends. I didn't have anybody. Um, and so I understand that in order to survive, that survival instinct came to the people that were around me. We had to survive together in order to get through this. And the state had already been after me. They were going to either throw me in a girls' group home, like juvie, something of that sort, because I had been kicked out of all of these schools, and I was not a bad child in any way. I was a child who didn't like people, bullies. And to this day, I will not tolerate for that. Even my children know that from very early age. They were taught absolutely not. There is no reason ever in anybody's life to ever bully, ever. We don't need to say bad things about other people, and we definitely don't need to say bad things to them and make them feel bad, degrade them, treat them like trash, like they don't matter, because that is exactly what happened to me as a child. I didn't have one friend. And I know that I was being picked on anytime I went to school, and usually kicked out by the end of the day, any school I went to. And so that was really what we were being sent to. I was being sent to my aunt and uncles. And when I say we, I really am trying to refer to just myself, because this is not anybody else's story other than mine. And I also have been asked to not bring certain people from my family into this story. And I can totally respect that in every single way. So I will correct myself every time I do that. And I'm sorry that I will keep doing it and correcting myself. But my aunt and uncle show up, and off to New Hampshire I go. And we drove from New Mexico to New Hampshire in about a week. It might have been more, but we got to see so many things. I was coming from not ever seeing anything of this sort, and we went to Carlsbad Caverns. I mean, I got to see the, what is it, the biggest ball made out of rubber bands. I mean, I got to stop at all these cool places, and I really appreciate that. And I'll never forget it ever. So thank you. aunt and uncle. Thank you very much for that experience. And before I go into my story, when I moved to New Hampshire, I do want to acknowledge and also get out there that if it wasn't for my aunt and uncle, if it was not for them, I would not be sitting here today. I know I wouldn't be sitting here today. I would not have the same life in any way that I have now, because that 5 years with my aunt and uncle saved me. Saved me. I don't think that anyone else could have done this, because when I say coming from nothing and then going to every single need that needed to be happening, it was happening. My aunt and uncle took 5 years out of their life and taught me everything that I know today. The most important things that I know today, they taught me. And this goes from basic shit, just learning how to use a fork and spoon and knife, understanding how to do that. I didn't know. Reading, I didn't know how to read. No, I did not know how to read. And this is third grade. I'm supposed to know how to read. I also didn't know how to write penmanship. I only wrote cursive, and to this day I really don't know why that happened, but I didn't know how to write penmanship. It was really difficult for me to understand how to write penmanship because it was so simple, I guess. Maybe I actually haven't thought about that much. And so just writing, reading, eating. I didn't like a lot of foods because I was a very picky eater. I also did not eat meat. So coming from not eating meat ever in my entire life to, and actually when I say not eating meat, it was more, what is it called? Pescatarian, because I had eaten fish, uh, fish. And I can just throw in there that I did eat frogs, as in frog legs, but they weren't from the grocery store. Real true story. So going on, in New Hampshire, I got to New Hampshire, and my aunt and uncle started me off in doing Aikido, which my aunt and uncle were the senseis of this dojo in Keene, New Hampshire. And I was there every single day, Monday through Sunday, and sometimes more than every single day. I mean, I would be there twice a day. During the summers, I went to Aikido camps. I would travel everywhere throughout the year, actually, to be in Aikido camps, which my aunt and uncle brought me to. And I love Aikido and will always love Aikido. I loved Aikido, and that was also a huge savior in my life. Sports, physical activity. When I did Aikido or any sports or music, I didn't have to think about anything. Nothing. I didn't think about a thing. Everything was just gone. And I was just in that moment, which allowed me to understand being in this moment. It taught me a skill that I didn't even know that it was actually teaching me, is finding my center. And it just became natural. And being in Aikido like that, and sports and music, when I was in there in that mode, it was peace. It was peace. I didn't have to worry about a thing in the world, and I didn't. So just in that was an amazing experience and a true savior in my life. And I actually have a very special skill. Well, back then, because I can't do that anymore. I mean, when people say children are sponges, it's a real truth in every single way, because I look at all this stuff as at that age that I did, and also back then we didn't have cell phones, so we had to remember all the phone numbers and all this stuff. And truly, to this day, I remember all the phone numbers that were in my life back then, and I haven't even thought about them for 25 years, right? And it's still 100% there. It's crazy how children are really sponges and they can take anything in. And so being at my aunt and uncle's was an amazing experience in every single way. And I wouldn't even know how to thank them, my aunt and uncle, for that moment of my life, because if it wasn't for you guys, I would definitely not be sitting here right now. So thank you. And long story short, I was there for 5 years and I fucked that up. And it's really hard for me, even to today, to understand the reasons. And I really will never understand those reasons, other than that I seem to just not give a shit. And I was also a teenager, and that is understandable. Most teenagers really don't give a shit, or they do, and not at the right moments, though, and not about the right things, at least for me. That was a real truth. But the day that I got kicked out of my aunt and uncle's house, I had just turned 13, and in my head for a very long time, up until recently, I actually didn't know the actual reasonings of why I got kicked out. And it all does make a little bit more sense when you find the reason, right? When you hear the reason. I actually thought that I had just snuck out of my house for a night and showed up the next morning. That was the story in my head. And I couldn't come to terms with that, into terms of why I would get kicked out for that. And actually, it's a very, very much different story in every aspect. I actually disappeared for 3 days. What was I thinking? I don't know. I definitely wasn't thinking, because I have a hard time believing that I would do something like this at that age and in that moment, because my life was sports, music, school, Aikido, sports again, and music, school, and Aikido. That was my focus in every single way. And that's what I was doing all the time. So to go back to the fact that I got kicked out for disappearing for 3 days, it's a little bit of a confusion in my head. Hence that I remember the day that I walked into the house and my aunt and uncle were sitting there, and my aunt and uncle just said, "Well, you gave us no choice, and pack whatever is the most important to you because you're going to Texas." And I mean, when I say going to Texas, that means that day. Yeah. And so that day I got on a plane and went to Texas. And I don't really remember the emotions or anything that day involved inside of myself, other than that I was bullshit and pissed and woe is me and how could somebody ever do this to me? And I was owed, because in that moment and for a very long time after that moment, actually, I always felt like the world owed me something. And for myself, I understand that that's not a way for me to move forward or do anything when I'm the victim. And that yeah, I'm owed this, like, right? But no. And it took me a long time to understand that, actually. But when I did, thank goodness I eventually did, and that helped a lot. But in that moment, I went to Texas and a reality check came real fast. I landed in Dallas and I got picked up by my mother and my stepdad, and we drive about an hour towards our destination in Ladonia. And we pull up into the center of town, and we pull up and there's this big building on the center of town. There's a bank and a doctor's office and the police station and like, the center of any town, businesses. But there's this building that we pull up in front of, and well, it's our home. And so, wow, 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 coming from having everything met for 5 years and then going right back to nothing being met and danger all over again. But now I'm a bit older, I can fend for myself a lot better than I was able to before. And actually, before I still fended for myself as much as I possibly could in certain circumstances. So, but I got to Texas, and walking into this building, I mean, I was already used to abandon anything, as in homes, anything that I would touch my foot in with my parents. It was always abandoned. Honestly, we lived in many abandoned homes with no electricity and no water, holes everywhere. But this building had holes everywhere, very unsafe. And it's crazy because it's this just really, really big building, and there's a lot of room downstairs, which was pretty much empty. And my stepdad had his art, his pottery area. There was electricity in this building, but no actual running water. So what we were doing, actually, we were taking a hose and running it all the way through this field where there was another home who actually had water, and we had to steal it from them. I'm pretty sure we were stealing it. I'm not sure if we were actually allowed. We might have been allowed. I mean, they might have gotten permission. Probably not. So I'm in Texas. I am playing soccer. I made the all-star team that was in Dallas, and it's a very hard team to make, and I was very proud of myself. But how was I supposed to get from Ladonia to Dallas every weekend and even during the week for practices? And so that lasted as long as it could, because eventually I could not get to Dallas. My stepfather had a truck that was breaking down in its own self, and also we had to start the truck in second, or I know it originally had been second gear, but I think it ended up at third before I left. But basically, you had to make sure you never parked on a hill, ever, ever, ever. Yeah, that would be bad news, at least an uphill. But and I would be outside of the truck, put the car in neutral, put the truck in neutral, and push until felt like I was going just fast enough where I could start the car and throw it into second or third gear, and there we go. I could go. That was an everyday situation in aspects of driving. And even, I mean, at points, we didn't have gas to get places. We didn't have the money to buy gas. And so what I did was I actually ended up going to school. I played soccer until I could. And then about a year in, I started to fight with people, because I was not trying to hurt anybody. But when somebody hurts somebody that is very close to me and that I care dearly about, and if I see that, I had a tendency to lose it. I did lose it, and I could have hurt this person very badly, actually, if no one was around to get me off of her. I blacked out, don't remember anything about how it all happened, as in how I jumped this fence that was about 9 feet tall, 8 feet tall. Didn't even think about it. I don't even know. Is what my instincts just came out, and my protector inside of me came out, and I jumped. And from that moment, c'est la vie, because I really don't remember, but I do know that I could have really hurt this girl. And so then my father and mother were like, "Oh shit, what's gonna happen? She's gonna get thrown in juvie, And now I'm 13 years old, so of course that is an option. And even back then, at 8 years old, that was still an option, and they were gonna do it. So I moved to San Antonio. I got sent to San Antonio with my stepmother, And that only lasted for 2 weeks. Then I was back to near Ladonia. And so what I did was in that moment, I decided that the only thing I could do, and actually, I think when I had just arrived to Texas, I knew that I had to take care of myself. I couldn't rely on anybody ever again in that moment. So I got a job. I actually got help from the state, food stamps and some money, and some actually rental money that went towards, it was supposed to be helping my parents, but I did get it. And the state didn't know about any of this because this is a 13-year-old trying to make her way through the world without a guardian, without anybody taking care of her, really. But I did manage. At 13, I got a efficiency apartment in Commerce, and so it was a motel, and this woman who owned it actually rented out the rooms as efficiency, and so we could live there. We paid month by month, but I had to get a guardian to make sure that I could still go to school. So what I did was I bartered with her basically, and she for her signature and as a guardian, and she just looked at me and she said, "Well, the moment you fuck this up, I'm not going to have that conversation. It'll be 100% done." I took that very seriously. So what I did was I went to work, school, any sport I was doing, and at that time I wasn't able to do sports because I didn't have a car and I didn't have my license or anything. So I was going to school and I had a job until 2 a.m. at Dairy Queen. I think I went around 5 p.m. and then to 2 p.m. Pretty much every day. I might have had a couple of days off. I'm sure I did. But that's what I did for the next 6 months before I left Texas, and managed to, pay the rent, go to school, and keep my job. And then also focus really, really hard on getting to New Hampshire. That was the one place I knew that I just needed to get to in order to make another choice about my future. And so in that summer, I managed to get myself, I got a plane ticket and I went back to New Hampshire. And I actually never went back to Texas or anywhere else as a child in this moment to another state or anything. I stayed in New Hampshire and I was able to manage all of that until 16 when I emancipated myself. But for today, I only have 3 minutes left of this, and I am going to leave it at that because with every story comes the rest of it. And the rest of it for this moment and the story, next episode, I will go over all of the inner stuff and the mental stuff that was happening in that moment, and the choices that I made and the behavior that came with it all. And this is what will happen on Bluebirds on the Wire for the next few. I hope everybody enjoyed today, and welcome back. Thank you very much. And I do hope that everybody is enjoying their night tonight. And if you're not, hopefully you can just sit down and breathe for a minute, because sometimes just breathing will help you. And actually, all the time, just breathing will help an aspect within yourself to just calm down and think a little bit better about things. Because when you can't breathe, how are you supposed to make any decision at all the correct way? Have a really great day and enjoy this night. Thank you very much. And I will be back with Bluebirds on the Wire.